Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening. All eyes on Musk. I think all eyes are literally on Musk. The funny part is that he dropped that little weird tweet saying that I will not disappoint or some crap like that. That is hilarious. But what's going on, everyone? Hope you guys had a pretty solid day today. Today was a little interesting. I did kind of give you guys a little bit of a tip yesterday when we were on live, not only about necessarily about earnings per se, but also about how the EMAs were reacting in terms of and giving you that key level off of SPY's daily chart. So that's something I'm going to touch basis on, and hopefully, if you guys took the tip that I kind of gave you yesterday, it actually was something that you could have actually applied to your trading today. So I'll kind of go through that, give you guys my insight on SPY here. Obviously, we're waiting for the little bomb to drop here on Tesla to see those numbers just come out. The fact that it's not necessarily pushing up more so in anticipation, a little bit of suspense right now. But by the way, Renee, what's going on? Derek, Alobo, I am watching Tesla. It does seem like the Dojo gang here in our Discord actually did pick up some lotto puts, keyword lotto. I did not partake in that. I mean, unfortunately, I have trouble actually going against Elon. And not only that, I kind of made it an extreme effort to not necessarily gamble on earnings this season. So it's not necessarily like normal circumstances playing earnings this season to me. Because a lot of what I think is going to end up happening, I think is going to be a flip of the script. And that's primarily because of future guidance. That's what my biggest trepidation is in playing any earnings this season right now. That's what we'll see what ends up happening. All right. My guy says it's mooning. Let's actually take a look at something real quick. Hold on. I'm gonna take a look at something, then I'll jump into SPY. We'll take a look at it in the analysis. See what some forecasts that we're taking a look at. But I'm gonna just open up Tesla on my phone. That way, I'll see what ends up happening with it as I drift away from the chart that's on our screen right now. All right. So let's kind of drift away. I'm sure if we get some drastic price action, someone will drop me a comment like El Lobo falsely telling me that it's mooning right now, and it's technically not. All right. But nonetheless, I'll get back to the analysis in terms of levels here in just a second. Let's see what she does as she kind of flips into the red here. All right. But I do want to jump into SPY. That way I kind of give you the analysis of what I'm looking at, what I'm potentially going to be forecasting here so far to really just take place. One thing I did want to get on here was again the EMAs. That was pretty much the key point of what I wanted to highlight. Let's get into the smaller time frame and then I'll zoom out to give you the bigger picture of how you could have used the EMAs, particularly today in terms of price action. What I did notice here earlier on was basically a little bit of a rising wedge type of action. You could also call it a leading diagonal that took place here. Going into this morning's little, I want to say, little dump that we call it, a little bit of a flat price action. Bears wanted to just lean into that bear case scenario as we were literally, we gave up all those gains that we had yesterday. And if you remember when I came on live yesterday afternoon, we saw Netflix was up that $30. SPY was up about $2. We're like, all right, everything looks chill. The market's going to moon. And I did give you that trepidation as well yesterday, saying that I did not feel as comfortable looking into a lot of these different names, individual tickers I'm speaking of, giving you my specific levels because, as you noticed by morning, the entire gains from the broader market were literally just wiped out. So, as you saw, we basically just had a nice little base. We attempted a recovery. We ended up failing that, and that's when things just started to go south. We broke below that support of the leading diagonal, and we started to lean in towards that 200-day EMA, sitting off for the 15-minute here. And then that was where we relatively had a nice little recovery. We started to base, as we know that Tesla was like more so the biggest heavyweight in just giving us a lot of a consolidation type of day ahead of their earnings. So that's what I was looking at. Going into tomorrow, I'm going to look potentially if we can break north over that 370 mark to attempt another move as we did this morning, trying to push north over 372, which we failed to do so. But 370 is going to be that breaking point where I'm going to see tomorrow. If we do get any kind of pop tomorrow morning, do we see us start to push north to 370? Otherwise, support that I have that we're basically just basing right off of is that 367.34, and then looking for continuation below what was relatively our low today off of that 200 EMA sitting at 366.04, and that should cause that waterfall effect to then cover this entire gap fill sitting here below 363.97, and that does not complete until 358.69, where all eyes will be on marquee level of 360. All right, so that's what I'll be watching for. Now, how you could have taken advantage, and I'm just gonna get rid of the lines real quickly, so that way I can give you the larger time frame, broader picture of how you could have used the EMAs to pretty much apply to your trading today. All right, so let's get out to the weekly time frame, and that way it'll give you a better picture. So one of the biggest things I mentioned yesterday was that 20 EMA. That was that red line. I think I put a lot of emphasis in repeating that key level, and that was 369.71. And if you notice with today's candle, we attempted to break north of over that 369.71. That's when we had that little early morning push, but that did not particularly hold. So now the key point of emphasis would have been, all right, I just saw the market give you a strong reversal early into the morning. If you didn't catch that reversal earlier on, now you're looking, all right, I'm already too late. I'm not necessarily going to chase. But what the key factor was is that you wanted to see it once it break back below that 20 EMA, below that 369.71 level. That's when you should have started to look for the retest of that EMA as a potential resistance. And that's what I actually did in terms of playing the downside. And I was in 0 day spy puts. That's how I was able to apply that. So I was watching for us once we couldn't get a continuation of the breakout above 372. That's when I was watching. All right, now I'm going to look to basically break down below the 20 EMA, look for the breakdown below 369.72. And then I was watching for the retest to then say, okay, I'm going to look to enter right below that 20 EMA off of the retest, the rejection, and then look for the downside. And that's particularly exactly how that ended up playing out, right? Of course, you would have had your stop losses at that given point, entering below the 20 EMA, then looking to pretty much have a relative, 15 to 25% stop loss, depending on your portfolio size. But that was just a marquee level and strategy of utilizing that 20 EMA today and how that would have actually gauged towards entering, whether it be a call. You could have entered calls above 369.72, take that move up towards that 372 that we ended up having as a resistance, or you watch for the break right back below the 20 EMA, below 369.72, and you had more ample room to the downside in making gains. All right, so that's something I just wanted to reiterate off of yesterday. If you didn't kind of get that tip that I mentioned yesterday on live, hopefully that could potentially help you with your trading here moving forward. All right, but especially when you have price action just above or below EMAs, particularly off of the daily time frame, that's very much a very key level. As you see, pretty much again here, I can just give you another example dating back towards October 5th, October 6th. If you see that you basically got the rejections off of that EMA, that 20 EMA yet again, you see the downfall that took place. You had an opportunity to say, okay, market's going to make an attempt to reclaim over the 20 EMA. But once you see it start to fall off, it starts to regress off of that 20 EMA as a potential rejection. That's what you're looking at for those opportunities of the shorts that we've had multitude of opportunities for majority of this year so far. All right. But that's just something I want to throw out a tip. So if you didn't catch me say that yesterday, hopefully you can pretty much take a look at that. But like I said, downfall wise, I think we can trade down towards that 360, especially if Tesla does roll over here after hours. I don't see a reason why we don't necessarily have a pretty strong red day. I did want to take a look at something else as well. I know that Lamb Research also has earnings this afternoon as well. So that was something, and I was leaning bullish on Lamb Research as well. I actually am more so interested, not necessarily, I was tempted to play Lamb Research calls over Tesla for earnings, but I chose to just stay sidelined on earnings. Like I mentioned, I'm pretty much practicing a good routine of not getting into the habit of gambling for this earnings season. But I am actually interested tomorrow to see the fact that Lamb Research actually did pop. How does that potentially do for maybe the semis across the board? So that'll be something that maybe I want to see tomorrow. Obviously, I'm sure a lot of weight's going to hold on Tesla as I'm going to pretty much glance over there. And Tesla is down about $10. So it does look like the lotto puts that the Dojo gang took in the Discord here today. It does look like it is going to pay off potentially. I would hope that it stays down and it's not a whipsaw right back to the upside and causes IV crush. But it does look like it's going pretty solid as of right now. In terms of downside, and I will actually stretch it out towards the weekly to give you a better image. I'm actually looking at that 200-day EMA to potentially hit. At what given point is that going to play out? That is the larger degree question right now, because obviously I'm on the weekly time frame here, but I am looking for that 200 EMA test here off of the weekly at some given point in time. And if I'm being, from a personal perspective, I expect it to happen before the first week of November. That's my time frame that I'm looking at. Now, obviously, I was more so favoring the fact that Tesla would maybe more so give us a little bit of a pop going into tomorrow morning, maybe an IV crush type of scenario, and I'll wait for that IV to die out tomorrow and then play the downside. If it doesn't end up happening that way, I'm not going to force it to play out. But I would more so prefer to necessarily get in an entry here. If I can get in above that 220 spot, I think I'm comfortable getting into puts tomorrow. If it can reclaim over 220 and maybe stand still into the market open, I would look to get into puts at that given price point or anything above 220. But other than that, I was not going to necessarily try and get IV crushed. The fact is that once you see so many eyes on one given ticker, especially, right, that's when things start to get really bad in terms of earnings, because then it's usually the fact that it's either A, it's going to go in the opposite direction of what you're expecting, or B, it's going to get IV crushed. And I'm not going to say that, but Tesla does have a pretty good opportunity. Obviously, I assume the call has not started just yet, the earnings call. So it is a possibility that depending upon their forward guidance, we could see this potentially actually IV crushed by morning. And then those that have expiration, I would hope they have beyond this week expiration. So those puts or those calls rather are not necessarily crushed as much as they should be. All right. But the other thing was that, and this was kind of a little bit of a surprise factor off of Netflix. One, everyone was more so, I believe, anticipating that Netflix would lose more subscribers, which they didn't necessarily do, but they were also the first ones to kick off the tech earnings season. So that's why it was a little bit more of a surprise element in terms of Netflix, as opposed to Tesla. All eyes are on this. It's probably one of the most crowded tech names to play earnings on, and that's why I chose not to. All right. But other than that, unless you guys have any particular names that you want to take a look at, go ahead and drop it in the comments. I did mention I was going to watch to see how the semis actually are affected by Lamb research. I don't see anything that particularly is swaying me towards any direction. I'm going to continue to kind of watch here for the semis. That's actually something, again, I think I've probably said that before, but I do have them pretty high on my watch list. So I'm going to look for that to see how they play out moving forward. That'll be something that piques my interest a lot more so. AMD, I believe I have this one heading down towards $52 at whatever given point in time that's going to end up taking place. That's going to be the question mark, but that's one that I do relatively have a strong interest on buying, especially for a long term. I'm going to watch this one down towards 52 at whatever given point it gets down to that price point. All right. So that'll be one I continue to watch. I did mention yesterday, if you guys actually remember me mentioning yesterday about the fact that I had a 282 target on Netflix. And I said that on live here. But I also mentioned the fact that if it got over 272, there wasn't enough, I want to say, meat on the bone to necessarily try and chase that upside type of price action. If you were able to get the dip and you were able to get an entry below 272, then kudos to you. You probably got a beautiful, nice little scalp opportunity, if not a nice day trade, particularly to the upside. It did fall a little bit shy of my target. That was roughly about $3 shy of my 282 target. But the given point was that you wanted to get the ideal entry point, and that ideal entry point was below 272 to get into calls for that one. So you had a relative opportunity. I think it was a little bit more of a mutual type of opportunity to the upside in terms of just the price range that it traded in. But nonetheless, that was a nice little opportunity. I do think that it's topped out for just the time being, maybe more so to say, particularly for this week. So I'm going to look for the regression here, look to see if we retrace right back down towards roughly around 262, 261 is what I'm watching for if it presents itself as a buy the dip type of opportunity. But of course, I'm going to need to see how the broader market responds, how we end up seeing any kind of formation on the broader market play out. And that'll be a deciding factor whether I look to jump into that at that roughly around that 261 mark. All right. Let's see a few names that you mentioned. Prachi, how are you? Hi. What did I just get a notification about? All right, my bad. All right, let's take a look and see what the names you guys mentioned. Lobo A and PX. You definitely have some of the weirdest stickers, but I'm pretty sure this chart looks. What the absolute hell is this? That's a hell of a weekly wick. My goodness. All right, let's take a look off of the daily here. That is a nice pickup. I will say that, Lobo. First thing I kind of identify is you definitely have a supply level sitting here right under this 13 mark, relatively between 12.80 to $13. There is definitely a supply sitting right there off of AMPX. Let's see if we can get into a smaller time frame as this is more so looks like a newer IPO type of name. Let's see if we dial down into a smaller time frame here. All right, so you did get into some nice resistance. So I see the regression that you had off of today's price action. Level that I'd be watching here is 1173 is what would be my first target here on continuation over today's high. So 1173 would be your first PT off of this. A second PT on AFPX here would be roughly around 1284 is what I'm watching for your second PT on AMPX. That is a hell of a nice breakout, nice catch. I'm assuming you probably caught that off of some scanner or some sort, but that is a hell of a move that you got out of that. So I would definitely kind of stick with this one. I would assume you're in a position already, El double. So again, watch those levels I mentioned, the 1173 that I mentioned. Watch to see if you can break over that level. And that is a hell of a ghost wick potentially that you have sitting all the way up at $26. When does that wick fill? That's going to be insanely crazy. Someone mentioned, oh my God, Tesla. What happened to Tesla? As I anticipated, it's going to be IB crushed, just like I basically anticipated. As of right now, it looks that way. We'll see. I think it's still early to rather say, but that's why I'm kind of glad I did not enter anything on Tesla. All right, let's see what else is going down the list so I could potentially give you guys some updates on those tickers you mentioned. Another one was Walmart. Walmart, beautiful name on this one. I believe they do have earnings coming up, but it's not until November 15th. But I actually do particularly like this name quite a bit. I would be watching resistance here right around this 134.86 mark. So 134.86, that's what I'd be watching for to get into calls on the breakout. Above 130, 134.133, 134.86, I will be watching for supply that's sitting right around 136 flat is what I'm watching at for supply, in which case you're going to get a little bit of a decent pullback, and then you should get continuation right up towards my next PT sitting at 137.11. All right, but I do like Walmart here a lot. This should be a beautiful one. I expect this to kind of act more so as a value play as a beautiful wedge that's setting up. I think that it's more so setting up potentially for a larger degree move off of earnings. So we'll see how much more this little wedge kind of expands. But maybe we end up getting that breakout up towards that 136, 137 mark. Then we get a significant pullback as a retest potentially on the wedge. And that'll likely be where we end up seeing off of the retest. We'll see the bigger, larger degree move to the upside. But I am relatively bullish on this. All right. Let's see what other names you guys mentioned. AAL. Let's take a peep. Isn't that American Airlines? Yes, it is. I was right. Let's see how the daily looks on this. Let's see. All right, so the daily's kind of just sitting, just hovering right below. It's actually rejected off of that 100-day EMA on the daily. That's something that's very noticeable right now. That's one of those kind of opportunities, like I mentioned with the 20 EMA alpha of the SPY, you had an ample opportunity to kind of get the rejection type of movement off of AAL, and it would have presented itself as a day trade opportunity for some puts. But I would be watching to see if it can reclaim at what given point over 14.13, and then you want to wait for the confirmation over today's high to give you the continuation. Otherwise, that rejection that you have today, I would anticipate is going to lead to further downfall, and I would be watching for the larger degree breakdown here. Under 1159 is what I would be watching for a reversal to the downside. Under 1159, that takes you right back down towards potentially the 50 EMA at 13.38 and second PT sitting at the 20 EMA at 1302. All right. But otherwise, that actually, if you can potentially get over today's high on this one over that 100-day EMA, then your bigger, larger degree target would be getting into some 15 calls towards that 200-day EMA, and that would likely end up being a potential swing for you. All right. But kind of a little bit of a tough spot. But I think what I actually like about this looking at the daily is that you have an ideal clear resistance just over you sitting right now. All right. So I do like that one particularly. Let's see, Prachi, you mentioned BKNG. I have not looked at booking holdings in a very long time. That is quite the ticker. And I believe the only concern too with booking that's maybe not have had my attention more so is because I know that liquidity is relatively low on booking. So that would be a caution sign, I would say. Just be a little bit wary about the liquidity if you're playing options. If you're holding shares, then that's a completely different story. All right. But right off the bat here, one thing that I do notice is you are sandwiched between that 20 EMA and the 50 EMA here on the daily. So key level support is sitting at 1736.73. Key level of resistance that you're watching is over 1808.80. And I would be watching for confirmation of that breakout. Above 18.32, that will be your confirmation of breakout, and that should trend towards that 100-day EMA at 1897. All right. So those would be your four key levels rather for bookings. But that key level support will be more so, of course, what you would want to keep your eye on. As long as it holds the 1736.73, you should be relatively fine. You should see continuation over 1808, break north of this 1831 spot, and then 1897 is your potential PT you're watching for. All right. But I do like that name. Let's see what else was there. Ripster was pumping AMTX as announced Grant. AMTX. Let's take a look and see what AMTX has. All right, so it's a nice breakout. I see why they potentially targeted it. So it's not necessarily a bad play. I do like this one. I mean, the chart setup is particularly there, so I can understand why they're pumping it per se. I would give you the factor of where your overhead supply is sitting at, and that's roughly right around 814 is what I'd be watching for. So 8.14 is what I particularly see as your overhead resistance. So if you are in a position on that one, I would just be cautious about 814. That should likely end up being a pretty heavy resistance for AMTX. But if you end up breaking 8.14 here, then that should take you right into $9, and I think that'll be a larger degree potential type of move that you're watching to the upside. And that'll be something that you have to analyze at that given point. If you get over $9 here, I do believe that this potentially has a shot up towards 12. And that'll be something where I'm sure I'll low, but you'll likely get into some pretty far dated contracts. 1250s. All right, so I said $12. You said 1250s. I didn't even read that, but I think that's something that we kind of coincide with. So I'm saying 12. You say 1250. I'm right there with you, potentially. So I do think that actually does play out in your favor. If you wanted to play it safe, wait for the $9 break and then look for the $12. But if you're just trying to get in early and you bought yourself quite the expiration, go ahead, go for it. In terms of support, I'd be watching for though. Definitely watch to see if you get a halfway back off of this daily candle, and that halfway back would put you roughly at that 50 EMA at 7.33, and that's what you'd be want to be pretty much cautious about. If you get greater than a 50% retracement off of today's price action, that would be where I say be a little bit cautious. Maybe wait to see if you even retrace back down towards that 20 EMA at 6.82, and then maybe that's your ultimate risk reward type of entry point. All right, but that'll pretty much be the wrap for most of the ticker names that we looked at. Let's see, Tesla. Any response? So she's still relatively holding. I don't know if it's pretty much enough of a move to avoid IV crush right now. Maybe it is being down $8, but that's something to be a little bit cautious about. We'll see how that earnings call. Maybe it's underway as we speak right now, but we'll see relatively how that kind of continues and going into the after hours. All right. A little bit AMTX went over 11 before Bell closed at 10:15 now. Let me actually take a look. What was it at after hours? Okay, wow. All right, I see the move. So wait, the AMTX move that you're talking though, that you're saying that was pre-market? That's quite interesting, I will say. Yeah, that's really interesting to say that it actually happened pre-market, and you're saying it's 10:15 now. Why is it not showing 10:15 right now? That's quite odd. Let me actually see something. Just checking something real quick. Okay, yeah, I thought it was up actually after hours, and it's not necessarily up after hours for AMTX. Okay, AMPX. All right, that's what I was like. Wait, hold on. Let me check another server. Let me check another server real quick. And I was about to say, I'm like, wait, what's going on here? Had me all confused for a second. All right, I do like that. I mean, that should end up playing out for you. So let's see how that goes. I mean, I'm still with in terms of the price targets of what I mentioned here for AMPX. But that was a hell of a breakout. And that's why I was like, I'm sure you kind of caught that off of your scanner. But like I was mentioning, you do have that resistance here. Off of the daily time frame, it does look like it could peak up towards 13 to top out. So I like the 13 mark to top it out. Now, the other factor is that, and depends on your expiration level on AMPX here. Then I think if you get over that $13 mark, then that can go absolutely bonkers if it goes over $13. So I think that daily candle that you're looking at right now, if it gets over $13, that will go absolutely parabolic. To just tell you, you could obviously see the wick from basically your IPO high from 26. I do think that we could potentially see this go over that $20 mark if it breaks north of 13, and that would be a pretty massive squeeze. So I would say watch it over 13, but once you approach that $13 mark, if that be tomorrow morning, if it doesn't gap over it particularly, look to pretty much just lock in some profits, is what I would say. All right, that'll pretty much be my safe side, just kind of saying that for you. All right. But other than that, let's see what the turnaround is tomorrow. I think it's been some crazy whiplash that we saw compared to yesterday to today. Netflix being up $30, waking up to it up, I think, what, 24, $27. The whole entire market SPY was up $2 after hours yesterday to being down roughly, what, flat to red this morning. That was quite this afternoon, the overnight swing that we had. And then China getting smoked overnight, that was not something that ended up helping us as well. So let's see if we get any more of a little bit of a market swing here tomorrow. I'll be honest with you, I do relatively think that Tesla's going to IB crush going into tomorrow. I think it's going to attempt to go relatively flat to green here going into the morning hours. That's what my concern was potentially. So we'll see how that ends up playing out. But I am going to be looking for puts on Tesla. If we can get back over 220, I think over that 220 mark is what I'm going to be looking for to scale into puts on this one. And then I'll determine whether I go out as a weekly or if I go out towards the end of the month on that. Just all depends. All right. But other than that, I will conclude today's segment with that being said. You guys all have a great afternoon, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Later, guys.